Yeah, I'm Mark, I'm an addict. What a big meeting. I want to just start off and read a bit out of the big book. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking and self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that some time in the past we have made decisions based on self which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. Let's start the meeting on like a positive note. I sort of, I have got a message. Just going to clear my head a minute. So qualification is, I think, I've never used drugs intravenously. I've never been physically addicted to any substance. But I'm like I've used things throughout my life from the word go. You know, it doesn't have to be a substance I spent a lot of time thinking I wasn't worthy of being in here because of what I just described, but my life has been a procession of different things that I've used. I think shame was probably my first dependency, almost like a dependency in a way, because I was used to feeling sort of less than, and I think really it was the last one to go, but I sit here now with a message, because I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. I found through the 12 steps out of that book what I was always looking for in drugs. It's just the book's come alive, and it's just turned into a fucking wonder, like a trip, and it's my life. I sort of I grew up feeling like I was trying to get into a party I wasn't allowed into. That's how it felt. Grew up very mixed up, disillusioned about a lot of stuff. Had the quite common sort of, I think a lot of people, we all like to sort of blame our parents and our upbringing, and I hung my addiction on that for fucking many years. But I grew up just fucking mixed up, really, and until I sort of got with a group of mates, was sniffing glue, drinking alcohol, smoking pot. Had a really very dysfunctional support network, and it was, I can almost remember like the relief of like, oh wow, it was the solution to everything, or it was the solution to my life up to that point, and it was wonderful, and it continued to be wonderful, it became. It was because it was just the biggest solution that I'd ever uncovered in my life. I invested my whole life into it. It became the clothes I wore, the places I went, the music I listened to. It was the only conversation I had in my head. It was my whole existence. I used when I was happy, normal, pissed off, sad. It was just everything, yeah. For like the best part of 25 years. You know, like I said, I didn't get into I smoked crack, I used gear, but by the grace of fucking God. And you know, when I look back on it, it's only been by pure chance that I didn't get. You know, there was times I tried it. I tried gear once in prison, and it was like fucking amazing. It felt like I had a half a fucking pint of warm blood in each foot come up my body, hit my head, and just go boom. And I thought, fuck me, that's too good. You know, and I attempted to use again at a later date, but it just never happened. So it was just God's grace that I never, you know, so I used for sort of the best part of 25 years, and I think, and you know, and I'm a very destructive drinker. I always struggled identifying in step one. I thought I was one of these people that said you walked through the door with your step one, because I can honestly, hand on heart, say that I have never drank without the fucking intention of becoming paralytic. You know, I've never I don't understand social drinking. It's like running a bath and not getting in it. That's how I see it. I just do not understand it. And it's like a mental block, you know, which sort of, you know, so I was a really destructive drinker, but I used to cross addict between alcohol and cannabis. Cannabis was my main, my main thing. You know, I used cannabis every day for 25 years. You know, I panicked if I had an ounce, you know, and it was like, and I used to cross addict. I used to drink like fuck to have less to think about, because all you think about when you're drinking is booze, money and women. It very much narrows your thought process. And then I used to cross addict over to cannabis and come out with all sorts of very cringy stuff, you know, embarrassing, do you know what I mean? But like to think I was fucking spiritual, do you know what I mean? It was a complete fucking contradiction to what was really going on. It, you know, it stunts anything spiritual when you use. But like, I had a fucking great time using, and I mean, it was, you know, I sort of, I'm not one of these people that, you know, I believe, you know, getting to where I am now in my relationship with the God of my understanding, which I believe is in here, that God has been with me all the time. You know, when I think back even through my very earliest years, the people that have been placed in my path, the situations that I've been in, like, there's been no coincidences. I feel that God's been with me all the time. It really spooks me out when I think back, you know, on the journey I've been through, not just recovery, you know, but through leading up to recovery, you know, to my first meeting. The person I seen at my first meeting was there for a reason. You know, it was like, he was like a punk rocker, and he was somebody from my side of the street, and it couldn't have been enacted. You know, recovery found me, I didn't find it, put it that way, you know. And it was, I got into my first meeting, and there was like, it wasn't like this, it was like a blue rinse fucking AA meeting in Salisbury, you know, and it was like, oh my God. You know, it was like I'd had locked-in syndrome up to that point, you know, because I couldn't talk about what was going on for me. And, you know, I thought I was the only person that used like I did. I couldn't tell my mates about it. They'd beat me up. And I couldn't, you know what I mean? It was like it was just in there. And then all of a sudden I found myself in an environment, you know, it says in the books, I fucking certainly didn't fucking fit in there. I was a right little scallywag, and I'm in this meeting, and everybody's talking about what's going on for them, and it fucking hooked me in instantly. That language of the heart, that thing you find I haven't experienced in any other place, where people like us speak from the heart, and it kept me coming back. I didn't work the program. In fact, I was going to AA meetings for probably 3 years off my tits, getting fucking, taking loads of pills the weekend, and then sort of, I think the best way I can explain it is slowly that I'm sure somebody must have mentioned abstinence at some point, but I have got this incredible knack of fucking not hearing things I don't want to. I'm fucking brilliant at it. It's like an invisible film of skin that comes over my ears, but it was, I think, just I was going to meetings, and like I said, I was so respectful that I'd stopped. It helped me stop drinking, but that, God was kind to me. I could see He carried me right the way through it. I was using all the time, and then towards the end, after about 3 years, I think the message, some of it's subliminal, that had got into my mind, because I was always respectful and listened and all the rest of it, sharing about fucking steps I haven't worked and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? Fucking cringy as well. But after a period of time, it was like I began to question my cannabis use, which I was destined to die smoking cannabis in my mind. I wasn't ever going to stop that. I started to question it. I started to question the fact that it annoyed me that my first waking thought when I opened my eyes was, where's the skins, to skin up. And I tried regulating it by not smoking it. I always just not smoking it at work. But anyway, I started to question my cannabis use, and progressively, and then I sort of, after a time, it fucking, it says on the thing that it's spun like a boomerang and Orbis cuts us to ribbons. It was like the thing I'd used all my life to keep me in that fucking no responsibility bubble in a cloud of fucking cannabis smoke stopped working, and it started to do the opposite effect to what I was smoking it for. I was smoking it to be free of responsibility and later. My best friend for doing that, do you know what I mean? And it started to have the opposite effect, and fucking started to get psychosis and stuff like that. And it was like having your best friend, it was like having your mother pretending she didn't know you. That's how it felt. It was fucking horrible. And so I was already kind of on the path. So I went to an NA meeting in Salisbury, and and I went there, and I couldn't get 5 minutes clean, and I see the key ring starting to go around, and being a bit of a glory hunter, I thought I'd try that, and all of a sudden I just stopped using cannabis, and it fucking blew me away, because I thought that was just unachievable. I thought giving up drugs and cannabis was unachievable, but if I managed to achieve it, then my life would be, I would turn into this, responsible parent and hard-working man, and everything would be cool. But no, it fucking, like a lot of things that have happened to me in the recovery, it was a paradox. The giving it up was easy. Life without it, fucking hell. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know. It was like walking through a room into a different world. I didn't know what I liked to. It was just crazy. This whole thing has been wild right from that first meeting. And I continued in NA. I'll speed up a bit. I continued in NA, not working the program again. I'm not like I'm fucking terrible at doing what I'm told. Always have been, still am. And after a period, I got to 6 years sober and nearly 3 years abstinent, and I picked up gambling. again, I used to gamble when I used, just just a little bit, but I started gambling in recovery, and do you know what? It became more acute than any fucking addiction that I'd ever had. I just couldn't walk past the bookies. It was fucking crazy, and as a result of that, I had, and as a result of if you haven't got a God of your understanding, I want to get onto that recovery, but I picked up 2 drags of a joint. 6 months later, Steve Spiegel fucking dragged me into the Provy, and that's been the start of this period of sobriety, started coming, still not really listening, but being respectful and all the rest of it. But it's been. Do you know what? It took me 13 years to get step 1. That's been my journey. I'm like, it's been amazing. So I'm gone. I've stayed clean since then. I'm like 20, coming up to 21 years clean. And I'm like, I've been, I've always been respectful, and I probably put my very dysfunctional fucking recovery against most people that fucking talk about they've got it together. Do you know what I mean? I would always help people. I would but like, so stay clean, and then about 3 years ago, I went to a yoga retreat in Cambodia. And I took this book called Drop the Rock, right? And I started reading this book, Drop the Rock, and it sent me into a fucking tailspin of depression. I had my first suicidal thought that I'd ever had. Got very, very dark. I was in lockdown. I seen a guy do a share on a Zoom meeting. I called him. I asked him to sponsor me. He sponsored me from a format that went back to the first 100, right? Went through step 1 in 3 stages: the physical, the mental obsession, the spiritual malady. Really got a good look into step 1, and was doing the last, but I had to walk around with a book with, struggle with personal relationships, couldn't make, and I had to write down instances in my day where those bedevilments came up. And I'm about a week or 2 into it. I was driving to work, and I was just, fuck. I didn't know how I was even breathing. I was fucking so full of fear. I was ruining my day before I got out of bed. It was like, to actually identify it, and doing that work in step 1 out of the big book, getting that's where it's at for me with newcomers. You sit down with the book and talk to them about whether they need to be in here. I'm going to say it, not fucking stick them on a gratitude list. Do you know what I mean? You need to find out whether you need to be in here at first. Do you know what I mean? And doing that extensive work in step 1, God's come up and tapped me on the shoulder, and my life has been electric ever since. And I don't mean that to come and I think there's too many people, or there's not enough people changing as a result of going through that book as you should go through it, working and using the book as a reference point. There's too many people in recovery that want to fucking change bits of that book. Do you know what I mean? Let's have it right. You've got a book there that's unchanged since it's been written, right? It's the 2nd most widely distributed book on the planet, right? It's a tried and tested map to God, You want to play God and fuck about with it. Do you know what I mean? I'm sort of, I sit here, like I say, blown away out of what's in that book. And I don't believe it was 2 pissheads sat across the table to write that book. Well, it wasn't, was it? I think God had a part in that book. It could, because it's not just a format for giving up drink and drugs, is it? It's like, and it's about what you can give as opposed, what you can give as opposed to what you can get out of it. I think that's what I've found. Rather than do a list, I do gratitude list. I'm sorry, I do apologise. Some of it, a gratitude list after you've worked through the steps and you're doing inventory and you're doing step 10 and stuff like that. Then yeah, but not initially. Do you know what I mean? I do a list of people that I can help and differences I can make to people's lives at the beginning of the day, and I'm using a lot less fucking ink than if I was starting to write down what I've got, because this is, this hasn't saved my life. It's given me a life. It's the most wonderful path to go on. I recommend it to anybody, but I also recommend, find a sponsor that wants what he's got. Find a sponsor that comes out of that book, and if they start talking to you about stuff that's not in that book, question it. Thank you.